with the troubles of this world, troubles of this world, troubles of this world, I soon will be done with the troubles of this world. I'm going home to live with my God. I'm going where there's no more dying. Going where there's no more dying. I'm going where there's no more dying. I'm going home to live with my God.
Bienville is all you need to know. You might have noticed a couple blocks that way, Bienville Street. That's him. Iberville. That's his brother. That helps out with our street names. But they're French Canadians. They come down here and they decide this is the perfect place to put a colony. Because it is. I know. After Katrina, some of our congressmen didn't think so. But this is exactly where we have to be because it's the only spot along the river where you can put a port for the river. So Bienville knew this. He wrote back to the King of France. He said, look, I found the spot. I need some colonists. And the King of France said, well, gee, that's a mosquito-infested swamp with water moccasins, alligators, and spiders. Oh, let's see, the size of your face. I'll try, but I don't know how much luck I'm gonna have. Well, he does try. He advertises boldly, he begs wildly. In the end, no one is coming here. Not willingly. It's okay. He does what any good 18th century monarch does. He just heads off to the Bastille. And he says to all the thieves, debtors, robbers, prostitutes, cheaters, and mental patients, unfortunate foes, hey! Have I got a deal for you? You guys can lie in your chains and rot, and you will. Or you can get on that ship tomorrow and go over to the New World and build me a colony. And they do. For better or worse, obviously, this is one offer they can't turn down. So consequently, our first colonists here are thieves, debtors, robbers, prostitutes, cheaters, and mental patients, unfortunate true. Y'all have been to Bourbon Street, yes? Yes, I know, not much has changed. We're traditional, if nothing else. But everybody comes down, they dig up the swamp, they build New Orleans. They lay this place out pretty much as it is. The grid hasn't changed in about 300 years. So they deserve some credit for that. But after that, they didn't do much else. Just kind of hung out, had a drink, watched each other die. So, after 40 years, the King of France just broke. He pawns us off onto Spain. We're officially Spanish in 1762, but it's a long story. I'm not going to get into the details now. Now, I just want you guys to remember one thing about us being Spanish. That's the important part. And that's at about 20 years into it, just down the street from the cathedral, there's a guy living by the name of Don Vincent Jose Nunez. Don Nunez, he is the Spanish military treasurer. And shortly before midnight, on the eve of Good Friday, he's at home, doing what everyone else in this colony had better ought to be doing. Is anyone? Usually somebody says drinking. And I say no. Anyway, he is praying at his home altar shortly before midnight on the eve of Good Friday because we're Catholic by law. Under the French and under the Spanish. For all I know, the guy was drinking or counting his money, paying his taxes, or any number of other offers I get for what he was doing. But officially he's praying, and officially he loves it so much he doesn't realize his curtains are blowing over his altar, getting set on fire, setting his entire house up in flames. And it's a windy night. It's catching. By the end of Good Friday in 1788, 856 buildings in New Orleans are rubble, burned to the ground. It's more than 4/5 of the city at the time. And if that wasn't catastrophic enough, dire enough, tragic enough, 6 years later, we did it again. We had our second Great Fire in 1794. But during that first Great Fire, we lost our first school. The school, the students, the headmaster, everything went up in flames there in 1788. We had a lady on my tour a few years back who had stayed at the Place d'Armes Hotel on her first visit here to New Orleans. And she went in and she checked in at the front desk. Then she went over to the elevator and pressed that. She was waiting on that to come. And just beside the elevator was a little dark alcove and a bench, and a man sitting there on the bench reading a book. So I looked up at her and said hello, and she said hello, and how are you, and how's the weather, and turned back around then to see if the elevator had come, and thought to herself, for a split second, who's gonna read in a dark room? She turned back around and he's gone. And I said, oh, hey, think you're in it to the headmaster of the school there? And she said, I don't know. It's just one of those weird things I've been trying to figure out for the last few years. And that's what a lot of paranormal experiences are. They're weird things that happen out of the corner of your eye or in a split second when you pass by a doorway. Things that always leave you second guessing yourself and figuring, you know what, probably it's just me. But every so often they're so very much in your face that you can't much deny them. So we're gonna go around the corner and talk about it. It is the Floss Arm Hotel too. And you see that second floor structure supported by poles to the ground, kind of like the one above you? That's a gallery. Now, a gallery is not to be confused with a balcony. Balconies are different. A balcony is that third floor structure you see supported by brackets only. Just a little bit of architectural trivia for you, don't worry. It's all I know. See the windows on the edge of the building? They're part of the stairwell, don't count them. I'm talking about the two windows just in from the stairwell on the second floor gallery. Now, years back, there's a lady staying at the hotel, sitting out there on that gallery, doing what I think most of us do. First time we come to New Orleans, she's just looking around, taking it all in. And there's a gentleman on the gallery next to her, and you know what? She's a friendly lady. She starts chatting with him. La, la, la. 10+ minutes go by. She's there in his presence. When her friends call her in, they say, hey, come on, let's go. We didn't come to New Orleans to sit here. We want to go out. She says, all right, just give me a minute, will you? And she goes to say goodbye, but he's already gone. But still, she's so curious about him. She goes around to the front desk and she says to the clerk there, well, I'd like to inquire about the man in the room next to me. And the clerk says, yeah, all right, lady, what's your room number? She gives it to him, and he says, no, there's nobody there, it's vacant. And she says, no, there's somebody there. I talked to him just like I'm talking to you. Somebody in that room. And he says, well, why don't you describe him to me then? And she says, sure, you know, he's yay big, dark suit, dark hat, dark hair, kind of mysterious, kind of debonair. The clerk says, yeah, sounds kind of like our ghost. Doesn't know what to make of that. She says, he's pulling my leg. She decides to go on about her business, has a good time, avoids the front desk for the rest of her stay. A couple days later, she and her friends are packing up, getting ready to go home. Well, she bought herself a hat over at the French Market while she was here. So before she packed up her things, she decided to model it in the mirror, and her friends, they had a couple shots left in their roll of film. So they took her picture while she modeled. They took her picture while she modeled her hat in the mirror. They went home, they got all that film developed, and they looked at that picture, and in it right next to her was the very same man. Alrighty. You guys see this building here, the Hotel Provincial? This used to be a hospital during the Civil War. And New Orleans, for our part, we fell early in the Civil War. April of 1862, just a year into it. Admiral Farragut, you know, full speed ahead and damn the torpedoes. That guy. He came barreling down the Mississippi River, took over New Orleans just like that. We weren't very well guarded here. And Lincoln wanted to secure all the ports so that he could starve out the South if he needed to. So when this happened, you know, 92, 94% of the population here pledged their allegiance to the Union. We went quietly, but still we had a lot of sick people to tend to. So if you took a bullet during the Civil War, you're gonna get something cut off. I mean, if you took a bullet here, they were going to put a tourniquet here and saw your leg off here. And if you took a bullet here, they were going to put a tourniquet here and saw your leg off here. It's a clean cut. You know, one bone, one set of tissue, cauterize the wound with a hot frying pan. Send the person off on their way to manage their pain. However best they saw fit. Because for one thing, there's a long line behind them. Also, of course, they're not getting any anesthesia. And the guy doing it, right? He's not wearing a He's one really big guy, because it's not easy sawing through people. And he's got on a brown leather apron and a brown mask, kind of like a butcher. He's got a saw, kind of like a butcher, a carpenter. It's rudimentary, basic stuff. And if you're into it, just down the street there's a place called the Pharmacy Museum. They have a 19th century amputation kit. Yeah, leeches galore. It's fabulous. It's lots of gross stuff there. But a moment later, it's gone. And you know what? They get uncomfortable. They do. They feel kind of ill at ease. Especially when they see out of the corner of their eye for a minute, or reflected in a mirror real quick, a large man in a brown leather apron and a brown mask all splattered with blood. You know, they get uncomfortable. But let's face it, if you're a maid in a hotel in the French Quarter, a lot's gonna make you uncomfortable. You're not gonna fall apart over that. You're gonna make the new girl clean that room. Get somebody to go with you. You can cope. But not always. You see, there's a gentleman staying here one night who had sleep paralysis. You know, where your mind is awake and your eyes can see, but your body won't move. And he had an episode of sleep paralysis here at the hotel, during which time he saw a large man in a brown leather apron and a brown mask come and proceed to saw off his leg. He left as soon as he could wake up the rest of his rooms. Check it out. Well, just for the record, the hotel's got 4 buildings put together, and building 5 is the one that used to be a hospital. You enter it through the courtyard, it backs up to Decatur Street. And I actually had a couple few years back on my tour who said they checked into the hotel that afternoon, and they walked into their room, and the woman said, this feels like a hospital. I can't sleep here. And they went to the front desk and had them change their room. Off we go. Is the one you have all been waiting for. Dun, 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 dun. If you watch Travel Channel, History Channel, A&E, MTV, any number of those, they talk about hauntings in New Orleans, and really, you probably already heard this story. This is the LaLaurie Mansion. And the story goes back to 1834. Can y'all come forward a bit so people can get by? The story goes back to 1834, when it was the home of Louis and Delphine LaLaurie. Now, they were big socialites here in New Orleans. Delphine LaLaurie, she was a child of the McCarty family. They had a plantation upriver. They were already old money in New Orleans. Well-established, well-to-do family. Louis LaLaurie, he was the 8th son of a wealthy French aristocratic family. But by number 8, you're not getting anything. No. Your oldest brother is gonna get the inheritance. You will get just about enough money to haul your butt over to Heidelberg, Germany. Get a medical degree, become a doctor. You can bloody well make your own way in the world. And he does that, and he comes over to New Orleans to make his fortune. And hey, if only that he marries it, he's a success. So they move into this house in 1831, and they become notorious around town for throwing the best party around. Once a week, best food, best alcohol, best music, best of everything that you can get here in New Orleans. And believe me, in the 1830s, well, you can get a lot. Because when we're founded here in 1718, we're a God-forsaken outpost. Nobody wants to be here. But when the 19th century comes around, all of that changes. The locomotive gets invented, the steamboat gets invented, those things combined with our port, poof, we're the capital of the Caribbean. Before we know it, we actually have more millionaires in the Garden District when it's built than any other neighborhood in the country. So in a nutshell, she can have a great party. But she also develops a reputation for disappearing in the middle of those parties, coming back hours later in a completely different dress. Now this is rude on so many levels. Because for one thing, when you host a party, you're not supposed to ditch everyone. That's pretty rude. 2, a lot of the ladies at the parties, hey, they can afford a couple fancy dresses during a social season, but they most certainly cannot afford to go through 2 every single night. Because ladies in New Orleans in the 19th century, they go to about 5 or 6 balls a week. You think we party hard? I couldn't keep up. But while she is rude, while she is extravagant, she gives us a lot to talk about. And believe me, we like to talk. And 2, she throws a great party, it'll do. Well, early on in 1834, one of her slave girls is combing her hair. A little girl, 12, 13, by the name of Leah. And she catches a snag. And rather than being a good little girl and teasing it out gently, Leah rips it out. Delphine Lalaurie is furious. She takes up a bullwhip, proceeds to beat that child, chases her down a hallway to an interior balcony, and that kid's running so fast and furious that she goes over into the courtyard, and now Delphine Lalaurie has one dead slave girl in her courtyard. And here in New Orleans, that's a problem. Because we have a thing called Code Noir. Bienville laid it out, 1718, when he founded the colony. And it said basically how you could and how you could not treat your slaves. And 1, you couldn't beat them. You most certainly couldn't kill them. Couldn't separate families. You couldn't work them on Sundays. You had to allow them to gather. You had to allow them to work a second job, save up money, buy their freedom. It's a very liberal code. It's why we have jazz. It's why we have voodoo. It's why we have free people of color in New Orleans. That's why we have Plessy versus Ferguson. It's an important part of our history. But most important to this story is that Delphine Lalaurie cannot have one dead slave girl in her courtyard. It's a problem if somebody sees it. But as it happens, a couple guys had just left a party down on Royal Street, so they were trotting down Royal Street when they heard screaming and cursing the crack of a whip, and they said, "Whoa, what's going on down there?" And they trot down the street and look up into the courtyard just in time to see the little girl go over. So they report her, and a couple days later the sheriff comes by, finds in a shallow grave in the courtyard one dead slave girl. So now Delphine Lalaurie is brought up on charges. She's 1, made to pay a fine. It's a fine that would have been a whole lot of money. Somebody, she just pays it to. She's made to give up all of her slaves, but she gives those to her family, who promptly give them back. So in the end, she doesn't suffer any real consequences, but later on in 1834, during another one of her fabulous parties, a fire breaks out in the kitchen. See, there's no parking sign here. This was a kitchen, separate from the main building. It's got to be. Could put an open car to get fired. You don't want the kitchen attached, you know, but it's not far. Nothing around here is far. So everybody comes out onto the sidewalk and they just wait. Probably the firemen will come. They'll put out the fire. There'll be a few less hors d'oeuvres. It's still a party. But second, there's that gossip factor, right? I mean, everybody wants to see what's gonna happen next. And by the end of the night, they're gonna get an eyeful. Because the firemen come, they put out the fire, and they find in the burnt out kitchen there a slave woman chained by her ankle to the wall. Now she can reach the open hearth, she can reach a table, she can reach a cot, but that's it. That's as much range of motion as she's got, and she tells those firemen in her very broken French that she set the fire on purpose, because she said that she would rather burn up trapped as she was than live in the place knowing what was going on upstairs. People, when they went upstairs, they didn't come back. So the firemen thought they should check this out. So they went outside to Louis and Delphine Lalaurie, and they said, "Hang tight, y'all, keep your guests happy. We're just gonna check out the house here, you know, make sure it's safe for you to go back." So they go into the main house first, second, third. There's nothing worth mentioning here. in the main house. They come out here to what's technically referred to as the Garçonnier, a service wing, and there's a burnt out kitchen, but you know, we all know that. They go upstairs to the slave quarters and there's a door, a large, heavy, solid wooden door, and it is not like the other doors in the interior of the house. What's more, there's a big bar across it with a bolt. So they take up their axes and they go to break the bolt. And as the door starts to open up, the stench of death starts flooding in from behind it. So much so that it takes these guys 20 minutes of vomiting before they can get it together to go in. But 20 minutes later, the sheriff comes by and says, look, get it together, we're going in there. Finally, they open up the door and they find in this dark, cavernous room just a torture chamber. Because apparently they had been doing medical experiments on their slaves. They had them all chained up. They had one boy there who had his face slit open and the skin peeled behind his ears and his face is moving. And they couldn't quite figure out why until finally they get close enough they realize it was maggots eating up all the bacteria and keeping him alive. Then they had another guy there with a big rod through his forehead. Apparently they'd been using that to stir up his brains. Early lobotomy. It's my best guess. And then they had another 2 people, a man and a woman, out on makeshift operating tables that they'd done a crude sex change operation on. Unsuccessful. May have guessed. And then amidst all the litter, just keep in mind this place is a mess. The floor is just littered with instruments of torture and gore. And amongst all of it, there's something that looks like a caterpillar, and they can't figure it until finally they get close enough. They realize it's a woman, but she's had her arms and her legs cut off, and her skin's been peeled in a spiral to look like a caterpillar. Well, then they back up into a box. It's about the size to fit a medium-sized dog, and it's thumping. And they go to pry it open, and they find in there a girl who's had every bone in her body broken and reset at odd angles, so that if she should ever walk again, she'd have to scurry around like a crab. Well, finally they find one girl there, just one, who's not harmed. She's chained up, she's wearing one of Madame's gowns, but she doesn't look like she's got any damage. So they say, great, perfect, here's a witness. We'll sort this mess out. They go to unchain her, but she doesn't react the way they expected. She screams and she bolts and she runs through the window into the street right in the middle of the party, which does abruptly come to a halt. That's a bit much even for us. So everybody goes home, and believe me, by the next day, if you hadn't heard it from your mother, your father, your cousin, your grandmother, your neighbor, you read in the newspaper, everybody heard about the horrors going on at the LaLaurie Mansion, and everyone figured now they knew why she would disappear in the middle of her party. She'd come back hours later in a completely different dress. They were convinced she was so bloodthirsty she had to get it fixed. Even in the middle of a party, soils her dress has to change. They also noticed that they're still there. They haven't been arrested yet. So by the end of the next day, there's enough angry citizens around here, about 100, gather mob at that corner with their axes, their nooses, their homemade weapons. They're ready to take out Louis and Delphine LaLaurie themselves, save a taxpayer dollar. He does. But it's not that he wasn't going to arrest them. It's that he knew that any judge around here that he got a warrant from would be paid off like that. It'd be over before it began. He didn't want to see that happen, so he needed a federal warrant, but federal warrants were only got in Baton Rouge, and it's 1834. He doesn't have a fax. So he's got to hold off the crowd to prevent them from taking over and doing his job for him. And in the meantime, a black carriage comes barreling down Hospital Street, stops. Louis and Delphine LaLaurie come out of that archway there, wave to the crowd, hop in the carriage, bolt down the street, past barricade, past mob, past the sheriff, and are never seen or heard from in New Orleans society again. They're off the record. Well, after that, this becomes the haunted house of New Orleans. Nobody wants to go near it. They say they hear thumping, moaning, scratching, howls, cries coming from inside. They don't want to walk on that side of the street. They'll avoid the entire block if they can. Well, years go by, 30 odd years, and human nature being what it is, the place starts looking like real estate again, right? So we make it into a debutante finishing school. That's what you all expected, right? So all the girls go to school happily, you know, learn how to scream at the servants, balance a book on their head. But then they start to complain. One, they say they see this crazy woman with a bullwhip chasing them down the halls, cursing them in French. And they see this man, naked chains, bloody vacant expression, just wandering the halls. They don't want to go to class, they have to shut the school down. Well, more time goes by. And from the late 1820s, for the late 1870s, for the next 20, 30 years, New Orleans is being inundated by Sicilian immigrants. The French Quarter becomes an Italian neighborhood. The Mouffoulette is born. We got a captive audience and cheap breath, they'll go. And they go, happily, at first. But then they also start to complain. One, they say they find their pets disemboweled in the courtyard. One lady, she says she sees an apparition of Delphine LaLaurie over her child's crib and later finds a sock stuffed in her baby's mouth. Then finally one guy, he comes home from working all night long and he's trudging up the back steps and he looks up at the top and he sees a guy there, naked chains, bloody vacant expression, and he says, "Hey, get out of here." And the guy does. He just disappears. Then it's a vacant apartment building. Nobody wants to live there. Well, years go by, and in the late 1960s, early 1970s, a guy buys the building, a plastic surgeon, as it's gotta be, right? So they go in to renovate it, and they go to pull up the floorboards over here in what had been the kitchen, and they find hundreds of human bones. It would seem that all the thumping and moaning, the scratching, the howls, the cries that people heard just after the LaLauries left was not dead people. Not at first. Any questions? What is it now? Now it is a vacation home for a guy from Texas. Up until October, 2.5 years ago, owned by Nicolas Cage. In the corner, this is Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop. This is our haunted bar break. Yay! Their claim to fame, being the oldest bar in the country. But we'll talk about that when we come out. They're famous, infamous, what have you, for their voodoo daiquiri. It's kind of like a grape slushy. And after you drink it, you feel kind of grape, kind of slushy. Don't say I didn't warn you. You also know that you have to like Dimetapp, okay? I love Dimetapp personally, but not everyone does. Also, they have really, really, really good hurricanes. They are a bar. If you prefer, there's a coffee shop on that corner there. Oh, yeah, and the local beer is Abita. So, you know. But I have 8:45, so at 9 o'clock, I'll need you guys to meet me across the street from the bar, preferably a little down that way. Blacksmith Shop, their claim to fame is being the oldest bar in the country. But I don't think any historians actually think that. I think that the historians put the oldest bar in the country in New England. Some say it's the longest continuously running bar. Again, I think that goes to New England too, actually. Some say it's a White Horse Tavern in Newport, Rhode Island. Some say it's in Boston. Some say it's in Manhattan. I'm not going to argue about it. It means nothing. It does look damn good on a t-shirt though, doesn't it? It looks fabulous on a cup. But that's about all. There's a plaque on the building that says the structure dates to the 1730s, and frankly, no one thinks the plaque is right. Nah, everybody says the plaque is wrong. Some say it's the 1770s, some say it's the 1780s. Some people insist it dates to the beginning of the 19th century. There's only two things I haven't heard them argue about. One is that it's old, and two, it's named for Jean Lafitte, one of our favorite guys around here. Y'all know who Jean Lafitte is, right?
Famous pirate that helped in the Battle of New Orleans in 1812.
You got it. The War of 1812. So
Yeah, I know.
It was actually in 1850.
I know.
But yes, Jean Lafitte is a guy, the pirate that helped Andrew Jackson at the Battle of New Orleans. But that's just why he's important in history class. As to New Orleans, well, we loved him alive and we love him dead just as much or more. just look around. You see lots of pirates around here. I haven't seen too many this weekend, but some weekends you can't sneeze and not have it hit a pirate. But nonetheless, I've been doing this for about 8 years now, and I had the good fortune one night of having a guy on my tour who used to be a bartender at Lafitte's blacksmith shop. For years he worked there, and of course when he told me this, my first question was, "Hey, you got any ghost stories?" And he said, "What?" And he told me a lot of little stories, but my favorite story from that old bartender was that he had trained a young man there once as a bartender, kid fresh off the high school football team, you know, very excited to be a bartender there. And he trained him at night. And after training him at night for a week or two, this kid got the chance to open up the bar by himself. So he got the morning shift, of course. He goes in at 11 o'clock, opens up the bar. The first thing he's got to do on his checklist is open up all those shutter doors, right? And then the second thing on his checklist is to fill up the ice well. So he goes and he gets himself a bucket of ice from the ice machine, and he goes around behind the bar, and he's filling up his ice well, his head's down, he's concentrating. And a man comes from inside the bar, floats down the stairs between the fireplace and the bar. And this kid, well, he's not expecting anyone. He looks up, he says, can I help you, sir? And the man floats right out of the bar, out through the front door, and this kid leaps over the bar, because he's young like that, right? He leaps over the bar, he looks out the front door, and he sees there in the sunshine, just below that sign there, the silhouette of a man in the doorway. Nothing more, just that silhouette in the sunshine. So he calls up his boss and he says, "I quit! I can't work here." Any questions? All right. This yellow building with the blue shutters, the Andrew Jackson Hotel. This used to be a Spanish boys boarding school. It was founded here in 1792. Now I already told you about our fire in 1788 and again in 1794. So during the second Great Fire, this building was here, and it's still here, so obviously it didn't burn down. But 5 of the little boys who attended that Spanish boys boarding school, 5 of them were lost. They died in the fire. But 200 years go by. I don't think little boys have changed much, right? Hey, I think in 2,000 years, what motivates little boys, that's pretty consistent, of course. But what has changed? The toys, the gadgets, the bells, the whistles, things that go beep and have batteries like button flashes, that got good, right? Well, there's a couple staying at this hotel one night. They're getting ready to go over to Bourbon Street, have a good time. But before they do, they want to be responsible, find out what's going on in the world. So they turn their TV on to CNN. Well, they go to the bathroom, they come back, it's on the Cartoon Network. They say, huh? CNN. Cartoon Network. CNN. Cartoon Network. CNN, Cartoon Network, CNN, Cartoon Network. Finally they say, forget it! There's these scrollers in the TV, we don't care, it doesn't matter. We're going to Bourbon Street, that's what counts. So they go. They have a great time. Fabulous. They have a yellow drink, they have a blue drink, they have a yellow pink drink. Sorry, did I say yellow twice? Anyway, they come back very late and very wobbly. They look at their camera. Now, so far as they can tell, they have 3 pictures left in their roll of film. This is good, they need to know this because the next morning, they are going on a swamp tour. Come on, everybody. Yay! Love swamp tours, man, they're awesome. Anyway, they're going on a swamp tour and they want to make sure they can take plenty of photographs. So they put a fresh roll of film into their camera bag. They go to sleep, they wake up the next morning early, catch all the wildlife. They get their camera back, they take all the Tylenol they can find, they get on the shuttle and boom! They're in the swamp. Well, they get in the swamp and they see a big old bumpy alligator. So, naturally, they get their camera out. And all the film's used up. And they say, they take that roll of film out, they put a fresh roll of film in, they take lots of pictures. They go home, they get all that film developed. They got pictures of alligators and swamps, mule-drawn carriages, Bourbon Street, passed out transvestites, tour groups, Limes, Jackson Square, silver guys, gold guys, lucky guys covered in powdered sugar. And 3 pictures of themselves asleep in bed. Oh. Come on, everybody. Whoa. Here we go. And for those of you still processing, the pictures were taken from the ceiling above the bed. Off we go. Our next spot. But while we're on the way, I just want to call your attention to this place here, the Craig Tracy Art Gallery. Everything in there is a body. Some of it's obvious, some of it's not so obvious, but everything in there is body paint. So check it out as we go this way. Lovely Italian stallion. That dog will pose with anyone. Well, by now that building is the site of one of our most famous hauntings in New Orleans. It's a story that we've been telling at least since the mid-19th century. So apparently we like it. It doesn't die. But it's about Julie and Michi. And Julie is a place, which is of course a very 19th century term, isn't it? But it refers to a girl in the system of placage, which we used to have around here, and that was pretty much a very official mistress system. Over at the Orleans Ballroom, which is pretty much behind this building, they held the famous quadrant balls during the 19th century. Orleans mulatto, quadrant, and octave girls were invited, being half black, quarter black, eighth black. Anything less, they were considered croisé blanc, passing for white. They went with their mothers, their grandmothers, they were chaperoned, and if a couple wanted to have a relationship, he had to draw up a contract with her mother. So he had to buy her a house, she had her own slaves, her own allowance. Any children would be legally acknowledged by a notary. They had their father's last name. They'd be carted off to Europe and educated like all the other aristocratic kids. And when he died, the second family would receive an inheritance from the estate. Not as much as the legit family, but not a little. And all those assets were in her name as well. So that system, along with Code Noir that I talked about earlier, created a large population here in New Orleans of free people of color. They had money, they had real estate, they had legal rights, marketable skills, and they were comfortable with that. They were not insecure about their position in society. So Julie was a part of that population. Julie's the heroine in the story. And Michi, he's her lover, her sponsor, her sugar daddy. No title for the guy, he's just the guy. But as the story goes, and like I said, it's a famous story around here. We've been telling it at least 150 years. We must like it. But according to it, he put her up in this house. And this is your classic Creole townhouse. You have commercial space on the ground floor and you live above that. And their relationship is bliss, it's heaven, it's perfect. Up until his first wife dies. But when his legitimate wife dies, the inevitable conflict comes up, and that she doesn't much want to be a mistress, she wants the ring. So she starts in on him, begging, pleading, nagging, insisting that he marry her. Well, believe me, he is quite happy to do just about anything else. Give her anything else. Because a place, that's a status symbol. The more you can give your mistress, the more of a man you are. Interracial marriage, not such a status symbol. Not in these circles, at any rate. So she begs, she pleads, she nags, their relationship's going downhill through the summer, through the fall. Then she shuts up. Quits talking about it, and he thinks, thank God. Now we can get back to our fluffy little relationship, right? So respite, she's taking a breather. Because as soon as the holidays start, she's back in on him again, begging, pleading, nagging, insisting that he marry her, until on the coldest night of the year, she ultimatums him. She says, you marry me or get out, I never want to see you again. And he says, sheesh. You want me to marry you? I give up, I'll marry you. On one condition. First, you gotta prove to me that you love me. I mean, really, truly love me. You go up there on that rooftop and not but what God gave you, and hey, if you're there in the morning, I'll believe you. I will take you across the street and marry you. Until then, I don't want to hear another thing about it. Well, after that, there's a knock at the door. And before he knows it, the sun's rising. And this is bad, frankly, because you don't keep your guests all night. You keep your guests for a drink. Then you let them go to the neighbors, have a drink there, and so on. So he's actually been pretty rude. He's got to beg for their forgiveness, escorts them outside. Then he goes upstairs to fetch Julie, only she's not there. There's no sign of her. He goes to the next room. No sign of her there. He goes up to the third floor. Bed's not been slept in. Then he remembers that argument the night before, and he thinks, well, she wouldn't have done a thing like that. That's just the craziest thing I could think of. I was just trying to shut her up. But still, he can't find her.
Freedom in the USA.
So finally, but he can't find her, so finally he's buried dead Julie. Well, over the course of the next year, he is so distraught about this, he drinks himself to oblivion. There's no more of him after that year, and people said they used to see him up there on the second floor in the window drinking, smoking, playing solitaire, probably wondering what he could have done better. But nobody really reports seeing him after 1853. The mid-19th century rolls around and he fades from the record, but not Julie. Julie is actually one of the most active hauntings here in New Orleans. The height of her activity is when they're making a TV documentary about her. Apparently, she likes the attention. This place used to be the bottom of the cup tea room. You could go there, have your chai, read your tea leaves, your poem. And all the mediums there said that all you had to do was say her name and something would happen. The hair on the back of your neck would stand up, somebody would whisper in your ear, you'd smell jasmine perfume or magnolia blossoms on the air. Just ask. She'd give you some sign. Well, when I first started doing tours, I was out here one night with the tour group, and they'd shut down the bottom of the cup tea room and made the space into a blue jean boutique. So one night the girls from the blue jean boutique came out here. They saw this tour group. They said, oh, is this a tour? Is it a tour? Is it a ghost tour? And of course everyone's standing here with a sticker. They said, well, we don't believe in ghosts. That's stupid. It's just kind of weird in there. They said that they had a swing in the back. See, this door here takes you down an alley. And in the back, there's a courtyard and there's a balcony off of it, like this here, in chains, holding up a wooden child swing, just like that sign. Only it's a little wooden swing, like for a doll. So they move in, they see the swing, they think, we don't need that, they take it down. Well, the next morning they come back, it's up again. Well, they think they're confused. They're busy. So they just take it down again, going about their business. Next morning they come back, it's up again. Down, up, down, up. After a couple times they say, wait a minute, wait a minute. She likes the swing. Guess we'd better leave it. And they do, it's still up there to the same fact. Two of our tour guides had a friend who came and stayed in the service wing, in the studio apartment, just beneath that swing. And she was so excited to go because this is her favorite story. She's written her own books about Julie, it's her thing. So she went in, she put her bags down, she said, Julie, I'm here! If you want to make an appearance, I'm your biggest fan. And from that point on, whew, she was completely depressed, melancholy, suicidal. She wanted to blow her brains out every time she was in there. When she was out on the street, she was fine. But every night that she went to sleep, as soon as she was out, she'd feel somebody touching her face and her hair, and she'd wake up. Until on the second to last night, she didn't make it through all the nights that she'd booked, because she couldn't hack it after a while. But on that second to last night, she had a vivid dream that somebody was hugging her from behind, and it wasn't scary at first, it was just a hug, you know, but it got tighter and tighter and tighter until she thought she'd be crushed and not wake up. managed to snap out of it, and she checked out. Found herself a hotel room to stay in. No more melancholy, dismal, suicidal thoughts. No more waking in the night. Alright, so the last story, I would like to remind everybody that if you enjoyed your tours, I do hope that you did. Gratuities are graciously appreciated by all New Orleans tour guides. And we have a quote. Da, 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 da. This is the paranormal copy. If you've been drinking, it moves. It does flips. It's amazing. But no, more importantly, it's got all the ghost stories that I've told you. Plenty that I didn't have the chance to get into tonight. Bit about voodoo, bit about vampires as well. Lots of photographs of ghost and paranormal activity, but more important than all of those wonderful, fabulous things is that it's got my picture, which makes it great.